We are here today to celebrate the Hornell Library's 150th anniversary.
The Hornell Intermediate School's 6th grade computer classes have made 7 videos that will show how the library started with a bookcase and grew to be a Carnegie Library.
Thank you for joining us today, and a special thanks to the people that we interviewed. We learned so much.
Thank you, Mayor Buckley, for all the city history.
Eugene Baker for all the railroad information.
And Colette Cornish for all the information about the city historian.
Hope that you enjoy our film about the history of Hornell. Have an amazing rest of your day. We want to thank you one last time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turnpike Road was laid from Ithaca to Olean in 1809, and this was a boost to Hornellsville because it made more traffic go through our town, which brought more people in and more industry.
In 1875, 100 streets have been laid out in the village. We grew. The Erie had its shops built. More people came in to work the shops in the Erie. More industry came in. By 1910, we were number 2 in the nation for silk industry in the nation, Hornell, New York. That's super cool. We made gloves, hosiery, and then ultimately our silk mills morphed into underwear for ladies.
Here in Hornell, the railroad found this to be a super great place because the valley is wide, okay? It's sufficient room. They built 2 switching yards, locomotive shops, a depot, which was built in 1880 if you ever come down and visit me. And the tracks extended over 2.5 miles. They go all the way from McGee Road down in Belhaven. Do you know where Belhaven is? It's just this side of Canasteel. Just north of Canasteel is a little village down there called Belhaven. And the tracks extend from Belhaven all the way up to West Street through Hornell. So they built their switching yards here, and then they built a locomotive shop. 1903 they built a shop, and they made it bigger in 1923 because it was such a great place to have a shop. There was 3 divisions on the railroad coming in. Your division is called the Territory, the Allegheny Division, the Buffalo Division, and the Susquehanna Division. So this was a busy, busy place. You had supervisors of all kinds down in the depot. You had a telegraph office. You know what a telegraph is? Okay. Phone operators, crew callers, train dispatchers, maintenance away. The place was busy, busy, busy. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's people coming and going in and out of that depot.
In 1888, we were chartered as a city, having been first organized as a village of Hornellsville. And so people thought, as a city, it sounded better to just be the city of Hornell than the city of Hornellsville.
In 1891, so that's less than 40 years after the Erie came in, Hornell had grown to contain 3 hotels, 4 banks, 5 silk mills, a planing and sash factory, a flour mill, a tannery, 2 fence and cable factories, a carriage works, which was super cool, a creamery, which you guys are a little too young to remember, but Mr. June, his family had a creamery here, and so did Rangers. They had a creamery here. Machine Gear Works, and several woodworking factories. We were huge in woodworking factories. By 1900, we had 14,000 people in Hornell, and things changed. So by 1910, we were number 2 in the nation for silk. Erie was still going strong. By 1940s, 1950s, the Erie had started to change. So it became a little bit more competitive. And our industry in Hornell, almost the majority of our mills had relocated or just dissipated.
Hi, we are Lucy,
Charlie, Christian.
Angelina. We are doing a project on the Carnegie Libraries.
We are doing one part of it, and that would be the men who started the library.
We would like to give a huge thank you to the people we interviewed.
Thank you to the following: Kim Wood, Sydney Baker, Michael Calamano, Jeremy Palati, and Jason Jordan.
In 1813, things moved on, and the first schoolhouse was built within Hornell. It was built with Dudley Miller as a teacher, and Uriah Stevens Jr. and George Hornell, who is the son of Judge Hornell, were also teachers. It continued to be a common school until 1873, when a graded school and free academy was established. So that went on for almost 100 years. In 1844, there was a piece of land that was purchased for $40. So $40 for a piece of land for a schoolhouse that was built between Broad and Canisteo streets. The school was built by Ira Davenport and measured 32 feet by 28 feet. An addition was added in 1885, and this became the Hornell Free Academy in 1873. And it was also known as the Old Park School.
So in 1864 was when the church was built. And then by the first church was built in 1834. By 1864 it had outgrown the little building it had, so they built a larger. The Reverend Lloyd, the pastor, felt that they needed more churches, Methodist churches in Hornell. So that's when they split, because a lot of people didn't have transportation to get up here, believe it or not. So East Avenue was started at the Bryant School, and then the church on East Avenue now, I don't know the name of the church. It used to be a Methodist church, and then down by St. James Hospital.
In the early 1800s, there were no churches in Hornellsville. Before churches were built, ministers would travel from community to community to provide services at people's homes throughout the area. In the 1830s, there were several Presbyterian churches in communities around the area, such as Bath, Almond, Canisteo, and other nearby towns. A group of men here decided that there was a need for a Presbyterian church in Hornell and started meetings in a barn owned by the Davenport family near Washington Street in July of 1832. As that was fairly crude as a meeting hall, they decided to erect a church building here in town. A local man donated 2 lots on Main Street for that purpose, which is where our current church is now located. A funny story about erecting the building is that in those days, local workers were paid in money and in whiskey. As this was going to be a church, the Temperance League in town decided payment of whiskey was not a good thing for a church. The local workers said that it would be hard to find anybody who would not work without being paid in whiskey. But the workers were located and the building got done without the whiskey.
'79 or so, and before that, people worshipped in people's homes. Because starting in 1843, the first Mass was celebrated by Father Beyer at the Webb's Crossing, at the home of Thomas Dorley. So it was once a month. There were a lot of Catholics coming to the area because of the potato famine. By 1844, Beyer offered Mass at Hornellsville in Judge Thatcher's old.
The first newspaper was officially established in November 22nd, 1851, and it is called the Hornellsville Tribune, which is a much different paper than it is today, the Hornell Evening Tribune. It started because in 1851, the railroad came through, and Hornell was about to become a really bustling town. It was pretty crazy. The president even came through on the railroad on that first ride, and it was a big, exciting thing, but there was no local newspaper to cover it. So there was a lot of jealousy. There was a newspaper out of Buffalo that covered the event, but there was no local in-depth coverage.
Our group did the early history of the library.
The library has been in many different places.
Thank you to Chief Dan Smith for taking your time for our interview.
Thank you all for coming.
We hope you enjoy our group's video.
And then about 1879, it moved to over on Broadway, where the city hall is, where the fire department is now, but it wasn't that building. It was called the city building at the time. And what they did is they purchased a bell that they had made up in Buffalo, and they hung that on top of the city building. And so then they had a way to alert people when there was a fire. They would ring that bell. So if you had a fire at your house, somebody would have to run all the way down there, ring that bell, and then people would come out, grab the buckets, and try to put out the fire. And it was kind of a defensive operation, what we call it.
This video is about the Lycia movement, or the Age of Enlightenment.
We thank you for letting us interview.
Thank you, Dagan Funeral Home, for talking about your business to us.
I hope you enjoyed this video.
My great-great-grandfather started the funeral home about 18 or 19 years after the Civil War ended. So we've been around since all that time. So.
But you haven't been working there for that long.
No, I'm not quite 135 years old yet. We've been my great-grandfather and Laura's great-great-grandfather started the business. This was James B. Dagan. and he started back in 1883. And back then they didn't have hearses or cars, the horse and buggy. Have any of you guys ever been up to St. Anne's Cemetery?
Thank you for taking the time to come in today.
A big thanks to everyone that came and got interviewed.
Thank you for all the cool information.
We learned a lot about Andrew Carnegie.
So the Y started in 1883 to serve the railroad workers. So you know, Hornell was a big railroad town. We had a lot of railroads that came through the community and a lot of people that worked on the railroad that needed a place to stay, needed a place to eat, needed a place to shower and change, and to have a place to recreate, to hang out with other people. Many of these folks didn't have homes in Hornell. They were here temporarily. The Y was a place where they could go and they could stay and they could live.
So Father James Early, who is the pastor of St. Anne's Church here in Hornell, often ministered to the men that worked on the railroads in Hornell. And the story is that one evening he got called out to minister to a young man who'd been injured on the railroad, and at that time he decided what our community needed was a hospital. So with his life savings of $5,000, he purchased St. James Mercy Hospital. That was on February 13th, 1890. He died 3 days later, on February 16, 1890. He was a sick man himself at the time, but what he did in those 3 days was lay down the bylaws for the organization, probably the most important being that the Sisters of Mercy would come and run the hospital.
The Salvation Army is an international organization. Our international headquarters is located in London, England. The headquarters for the USA is in Washington, D.C. We have an international membership of 1.7 million members. The Salvation Army began in the USA in 1880 and in Hornell in 1895. We have been serving the public ever since. We opened our current location in 1969. This is the building on Canasteel Street, which was right across the way here, past the highway, that we were in back before 1969.
The purpose of the armory to be built back in the 1800s was to protect the military people that were going to be assigned there against workers. Back then, workers were revolting. Okay, so the state of New York wanted some sort of a military force to help control the worker.
It started with my grandfather in 1899. It's been in business ever since. My grandfather was started out, and then he was in with a couple of other partners from time to time, until eventually in 1927 my father graduated from law school and came in, and they formed the partnership Schultz & Schultz, which is what it is today. And partner today, David Schultz, joined the firm in 1968, and I joined the firm in 1971. So Schultz & Schultz is from my grandfather Clyde and my father Everett, and then there's two of us left.
I want to thank everyone who has contributed to this project.
I want to thank specifically the people who have used their time to come in and speak.
It was pretty hard, and I think it came out great. The articles we read were very helpful and hard to read, and it took time.
We enjoyed the making of the project, and we hope you do too.
February 21st, 1901. Misters Tuttle and Acker were appointed a committee to correspond with Andrew Carnegie in regard to a bequest. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 33rd Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1901. An application has been made during the past year by friends of the library to Mr. Carnegie, whose munificent gifts to institutions of this kind, as so well know, but we do not learn that a reply has been received. There would seem to be no difficulty here in complying with the condition he places on a gift of, say, $20,000 or $30,000. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 34th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1902. 1903. The managers are pleased to report the offer made by Andrew Carnegie to the City of Hornellsville to give $25,000 for the erection of a library building on the condition that a site be provided and that $2,500 be appropriated annually for the care and maintenance of the library. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. This is a munificent offer, one that has never before been made to this city, and probably never will be made again. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. In order that there might be no chance for its refusal, The managers took the responsibility of offering to the city the present library site, together with the library itself, to make complete the gift to the city of both a new building and a well-selected library of 13,000 volumes to carry it. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. The Common Council accepted both offers of Mr. Carnegie and that of the library. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. 1903. It has been felt, however, that the present site is not entirely satisfactory for the new library building, and some efforts have been made to secure a more commodious and sightly location. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. We wait the action of the city authorities. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. The expense, if any, should not be great, and is a mere trifle compared with that usually undertaken by cities that have accepted Mr. Carnegie's offers. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 35th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1903. Mr. Carnegie's munificent gift of $25,000, although accepted by the Council, still remains unused, and no action has been taken for its use, so far as we can learn, beyond the acceptance of an architect's plan for a building designed for erection in the city park. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 36th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1904. If the Carnegie Building is not to be obtained very soon, an appeal must be made to the people of this city for the money required to enlarge the building we already have. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 36th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1904. The uncertainty of the last 3 years, awaiting the action of this city relative to the offer of Mr. Carnegie to construct a building for the library, has interfered somewhat with the progress that might otherwise have been made. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 37th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1905. It is apparent, however, that Mr. Carnegie's offer, as made, will not be accepted. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 37th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1905. Enlargement must be made if the needs of the library and its patrons are to be supplied, and if Mr. Carnegie's money is not acceptable, appeal must be made for liberal donations at home. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 37th Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1905. The subject of a Carnegie Library has been before the association for several years without making material progress. It has now been definitely ascertained that the money for its erection is available. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 41st Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1909. A suitable lot has been found and the Common Council has caused the city charter to amend so as to provide for the support of such a library. As soon as the governor signs the new charter, it will be possible to purchase the property we have in view to erect up on it a Carnegie Library without more delay. R.M. Tuttle, Chairman, 41st Annual Report, Hornell Library Association, 1909.
Mrs. B.R. Wakeman, Vice President of the Association speech. This is an occasion of great personal pride and gratification to each individual member of the Board of Managers of the Hornell Library Association, and we hope to every citizen of the city. When the valuable books accumulated through years of care and solicitation have at last found a permanent home in this beautiful structure, the gift of Andrew Carnegie to the people of Hornell. Evening Tribune, March 28, 1911.
When the bank began in 1919, there were 6 people that worked at the bank, and they did everything by hand. You know, they literally wrote things by hand. And then since then, the different branches have opened up, and now we're actually up to 14 different branches located all across Western New York, from Allegheny to Whitesville, and most recently we're looking to build a branch up in Clarence, New York.
President of the bank was a Dr. Claire S. Parkhill, and you can see a picture of him there. Nice old picture. I always like looking at those. They're kind of neat. Now he wrote a little thing in his annual report that said, persistent savings is the only kind that counts and is the foundation of thrift.
Is actually a national organization, and it was founded by U.S. wartime veterans, actually in Paris on March 15th, 1919. And the cool part about that is, in 1919, here in Hornell, the Arthur H. Cunningham Post was founded, and their first commander's name was Archie Blades. And if you ever get a chance to go into the Hornell American Legion Post, they have pictures of all their commanders from 1919 up until today's current commander, which is actually the very first female commander here in Hornell.
Our IDA, it's called the City of Hornell Industrial Development Agency, and it was formed by the state of New York to do economic development in Hornell and to create jobs in Hornell and create a better quality of life for the people in Hornell. That was kind of what they asked us to do.
Thank you for coming today. We hope you enjoy our film about the library.
We would like to thank everybody that came in to be interviewed.
Thanks for all the information on the library.
Thank you. Enjoy the show.
The very first thing as director, I knew that the library was not handicap accessible and it needed to be done to make a big difference in the way people looked at the library and that they could actually come in. Those front steps are daunting. And there was no way a person who was in a wheelchair, a mother with a stroller, etc., could get into the building. So the first order of business was to write a grant for the elevator. And they were going to put it right center of the building in the back so they could make it accessible. What happened was I got the grant from the federal government. I had help from John Lusk, who's the local architect and very into historic preservation. So I had plans drawn up for free. And that was actually accepted, and we got the amount of money, and I don't remember now because it turned into a much bigger project. Don Doster at the time said, well, we really need handicap accessible bathrooms, and we need more space. So let's try to expand that project. So we did that. The library board borrowed the money to do the project. So that's how we got the addition with handicap accessible bathrooms, and how we were able to move the young adult collection from the children's room into a separate area. And after it was built, then they expanded the project, and they hired a fundraiser, and they were able to pay for the building within 3 years. Betty Arcangeli was a major part of that. There were people who matched things. I needed a $30,000 match. And Mary Beth Smith wanted to remain anonymous, but she gave me $30,000. Other people got involved with it. It became a major fundraising event. Took 3 years, and it was all paid off. And Betty Arcangeli was the person who was very involved with getting that paid off, as was Don Doster and Vera Lisi, who was president of the board at the time. So.
cover the expenses of part of the summer reading program. And some businesses in the community cover some of those expenses. But also we do fundraisers throughout the year to raise the money to help cover summer reading. We also are raising money to digitalize the Evening Tribune records that we have going back all the way back to 1851 in the library. And we've been able to digitalize up through close to 1900, but we've still got a long ways to go to get to 2018. Now, the Tribune already digitalized themselves from 2000 on. So we still have, a little more than 100 years to go. So that's part of what we use our money for. But we also promote in the community. And one of the reasons this year, we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Library Association, which is our library, now known as our Library Board of Trustees. These are the gentlemen that started the library here in Hornell in 18th.
Friends of the Library, and I was interested in participating in that, so I attended the meetings and I was elected treasurer, and I've been treasurer ever since. We do a lot of fundraising activities as well as fun activities with the library to raise money so that we can help them pay for things that are not part of their budget. We have donated to such things as the summer reading program. We have purchased equipment so that people with computers can project from their computers onto a screen. And we regularly help pay for the digitization of the newspapers that are on file at the library. They started collecting newspapers in 1850. They have them on microfilm, but that deteriorates, so it's not as easily available. By digitization, it makes it available on the computer, but it's very expensive.
Library before I went to school. My mother used to always take once a week, all summer long, we'd come and drive over the hill to the library, and it was always a good time. We'd go after supper and made a kind of an adventure out of it, and it was back then the fine was 2 cents a day, so yeah, when you didn't want to miss that, 2 cents a day. Anyway, so I've spent a lot of time there, and it's kind of been, it's where I've gotten my superpowers, I think, is from the libraries, the books, because I've had so many adventures in those books. And also, I'm kind of a guy who likes to build things, and so anytime I wanted to build things, I had a lot of confidence because I knew I could go to the library and find out how to do that. And so it's been a huge part of my life, I guess, is the library has.
The director runs the library. She's in charge of the
the employees and the hiring and the firing and so forth, but the board advises her and suggests things to her. And she brings problems to the board and talks to us about problems, and we try to help her with any problems that she's run across. It's really been an interesting job. I've enjoyed it very much. So.
Thank you so much to all the people who took the time to be interviewed for our videos. We appreciate all that you did.
Special thanks to the Friends of the Library and the Library Board and Alice Stacher.
A huge thank you to the Spotlight Theater for hosting this event.
There'll be a reception at the YMCA.